This study focuses on the historical image and today's image of Boston City and comparison of them. The main goals of this study are determining the environment, places, architecture, texture of two different chosen roads, and finding answers to how different they are from each other by comparing them. The spaces observed in this study will be evaluated with the opinions about abstract spaces, holy spaces, absolute spaces, contradictory spaces, and spatial triad of Henri Lefebvre. Boston City is one of the oldest cities in the US. It was the scene of several key events of the American Revolution, such as the Boston Massacre, the Boston Tea Party, the Battle of Bunker Hill, and the Siege of Boston. In this perspective, Boston has many historical places. On the other hand, Boston City has the 6th largest economy in the country and 12th largest in the world. That means Boston has another face which is quite different from its historical side. To observe these two different sides and also compare them, I chose two different roads. The first road starts from Beacon Hill District, where is the oldest district of Boston City, and ends with the North End District, where is another one of the oldest district again. The second one starts with Downtown Crossing and continues with Financial District, where are the totally new faces of Boston City. The observations will be dealt with in the following sections in details, and in the final part there will be a comparison between these two roads. My digital Flaneur experience begins with the Beacon Hill District. As I learned that it is the oldest district in Boston City, I wanted my experience to begin from here. I started to walk in Charles Street, and my first impression was about the scale of apartments which surround the street. The scales of those apartments are really close to human scale, and this makes us feel we are in a really warm and safe neighborhood, because as architects we know our impressions or feelings can be changed due to scale of buildings. And also my next impression was about the materials of apartments. The main material of those apartments are bricks, and the choice of materials also gives warm feelings. Also as an architect I can say that. This choice of material makes whole street work design in context, because they look like they were designed together and they speak the same language. While I keep continuing, I observed there are small and old-fashioned boutiques, stores, cafes, and pubs. As I observed from social media platforms, mostly local neighbors spent their times in those places. However, as I mentioned, it is the oldest district of Boston City. Tourists come to this district to see the environment. Henri Lefebvre says, urban society built with social spaces does not turn everyday life into an image. It changes the diary based on itself and transforms it. So in this perspective, the situation of Beacon Hill is far from just being an image, because the society turns it into a living space. Because yes, it's an old place, but activities of daily life of people turns that old place into today's living space. Because when I saw the old pictures of the district, I did not see any difference from today. But when I was walking in the street, I felt the mixture of history, modernity, and conception definition. After the end of the Charles Street, a quite different image says welcome to you, because at the end of the street you meet with Boston Common, which is the oldest park in US. I said different image about Boston Common because after following a street with continuous apartment, you're facing with an open and green space. Suddenly you feel like you're entering a very different world. The first impression of me about this place was about people behaviors, because unlike the people on Charles Street, the people in here were not in rush. The people in here mostly were sitting on the banks, looking around, jogging or walking really slowly. They were like enjoying the moment. And also in Charles Street, I felt myself just a walking passenger, because I felt like I have no or so limited time to look around. I felt myself I have to keep walking without stopping. However, I did not feel like this in here, Boston Common. According to Lefebvre's absolute space definition, human life is in close relationship and harmony with nature, with space that has not yet been cut off from naturalness. I know nobody is farming here, but still people feel themselves in nature when they are here. And again, Lefebvre says, all the human activity is trying to transform absolute space, but it attributes a different quality and character to it. Again, this space is not design, it's related space. It's space representation rather than representation. Yes, this place was designed by someone of course, but compared to modern city life, this place is a small and modern representation of a natural life. After the walk in Boston Common, I turned my road through the Boston City Hall Plaza, and I started to follow the Beacon Street. While I walking in the street, I realized one side of the road was surrounded by the apartments, the other side was the face of Boston Common. So the road was a mixture of the districts I have been observing. So I had a nice chance to observe those different places in on one street. When I walk on the street, I thought that how lucky the ones who are living in those apartments, because they are living in history and their daily view is that great park. Then at the end of this apartment, I reached that Massachusetts State House. As I searched from internet, I knew this building is also a really historical building for Boston City. It was built in 1798 and is still used. The building houses the Massachusetts General Court and the offices of the Governor of Massachusetts. As I observed from digital platforms, the building is at the top among the must-see places for tourists in Boston. I can understand that because, besides of the importance of the building, it has very charming facade and also has that famous golden dome. Then finally, I reached at the City Hall and City Hall Plaza, another area which has historical and also important buildings. However, compared to other districts I have been observing, the historical history of this district is a bit short. This area has many official buildings such as Boston City Hall Plaza, Center Plaza, courthouses, state and federal office buildings, and a mayor MBTA subway station. In this context, we can say that this is a place where official work is done. However, in City Hall Plaza there are many events such as concerts, festivals, and celebrations. In this perspective I can say this place is kind of a designed place for people to gather. Lefebvre says space representations are regulated, organized, and produced space are part of the history of ideology. So obviously this is a place created by someone or an ideology to bring people together, to place them as an image in people's memory. With the created area and the mentioned events, seems like it has an importance in urban memory. However, as an architect, my first impression about this area and these buildings was that the trend of brutalism dominated the region. So I can say it has quite different atmosphere than the other districts with this aspect. And also the choice of material was quite different than other districts. Mostly gross concrete dominates the facades of buildings. And as I observed before, the main material was brick. To be honest, after those two districts I haven't observed, I disappointed about this district. After I saw Beacon Hill, Boston Common, and Massachusetts State House, I did not expect to see these kind of buildings in the street. In this way, it is separated from the other districts. I just felt like the opposite whatever I said for Beacon Hill. After crossing the City Hall Plaza, I started walking on Hanover Street, another famous way to go to the north end. Beginning of the road, Haymarket meets us. Haymarket is an open-air market on Blackstone, Hanover, and North Streets, next to Fitzrose Fitzgerald Kennedy Greenway between the North End and Government Center. The market is open every Friday and Saturday. As I've learned from my search, the history of Haymarket goes back to 17th century. After all those historical and elegant buildings and atmosphere, I was surprised when I saw here for the first time. The crowd, smells, noises were quite different than from all I observed. To be honest, I did not expect the bazaar culture in here, but I can't lie, I love to be here. The behaviors of people show some change in here. There are no longer people who just walk and seem to be in a hurry. But of course, the rest of the week this place is not used as market or bazaar. While I kept continuing, I realized this district is pretty similar with Beacon Hill district. I can talk about those similarities as scales, facades, shapes and materials of the buildings which surround the street, and I felt the same feelings when I was in Beacon Hill. I observed really nice and lovely Italian restaurants in my walking, and I remember I read that the other name of this place is Little Italy. And as I observed from social media, tourists prefer this district especially for the white food options. So, I completed my first road by coming to end of North End District. In my second road, in order to observe different phases of Boston City, I chose my second road's beginning point as Theater District. The Theater District in the city center is home to famous sites such as the Cutler Majestic Theater and the historic Boston Opera House. So I started walking in Boylston Street, which is near the Boston Common. After short walking, I turned into Tremont Street, which is the home of many theater halls. My first impression about this district was it is some kind of mixture of modernity and also history, because I saw very modern apartments or buildings. However, I saw very historical theaters and opera houses. But I learned that from my internet search, this place is more alive in the evenings or nights because most of the shows in the halls start in the evening and the nights are more crowded and lively. As a digital flaneur, I decided to look at the night version of this place since I had no problem with time. And they were right. The night version of here was quite different. First of all, the colors and the lights of billboards got my attention. Because of them, I could not understand if it's really night or not, because they were lighting up the night and they were giving liveliness to it. And I think this is a good example of how people and their activities transform a space into a living space. During the daytime, the place was of course active. Eventually, it's a city center, but compared to nighttime, it was static and lifeless. However, in the nighttime, the place was more active, colorful, and alive. After crossing this area, I turned my road towards the downtown district and financial district and other modern faces of Boston. Downtown and financial districts are the central business districts of Boston. These districts are the location of many corporate or regional headquarters, city, county, state, and federal government facilities, etc. Therefore, I started walking in White Street, which is in downtown district. Actually, this place is a small section of modern city and today's city life. There are many constructed or ongoing constructions of many tall towers, high-rise office buildings, or headquarters of many business corporations. My first impression about this place was about the scales of the buildings. They are far away from human scale, and this made me feel a little bit insecure, because I felt got lost among those tall buildings covering the sky. The other impression of me was about the construction styles and also materials of those buildings. The buildings were or were still being built with today's modern construction techniques such as steel construction or column beam system. The materials used are steel, glass, composite coatings or reinforced concrete materials. But if I stop being flaneur and take a look at them as an architect I can say that I've faced with some impressive modern architecture examples as building types or facades. On the other hand, each building has unique facade and design. Besides, the fact that each building has its own facade and design has led them to be constructed without a holistic understanding and without a context. Then I continued in the Congress Street, which is in Financial District. I observed similar things when I was in Downtown District. I have already said these two of them are really close and has really similar features, so I can also say what I said earlier about the buildings here. And also I have observed that there are branches and commercials of many famous brands that we consume or use today. Henri Lefebvre says that everyday life and conception cannot be expressed separately. This concept, which emerged with the progress of capitalism and the development of modernity, will be taken into account as long as there is such a thing as everyday life. This thought of Lefebvre actually summarizes the question of why there is consumption culture or why we consume. Because we live in modern city and modern life, and we are told to consume in this lifestyle. Also, according to Lefebvre, at the consumption point, advertising has an extraordinary power. The ad itself is consumed before the product. The mass of science, image, and discourses is consumed. He says it is as if there is nothing other than advertising to give meaning to people's daily lives, to find their way and to direct their lives about ads. While continuing, I observed the human behaviors in here. People were in rush. They seemed to have no time and need to catch up somewhere. In an environment like that, I felt myself like an alien, because I was like the only one who stops and thinks about things like that. After all, I came to the end of the second road by coming to the end of the Congress Street and seeing Haymarket again. As I observed from my digital walking in two roads, I can clearly say that Boston City has two different sides. One of them is old, protected and historical side. On the other hand, the other one is new, modern side of Boston City. And of course, there are some differences between them. The most obvious ones of these differences are the scales, materials, and construction styles of the buildings. As you know, in my first route I observed masonry, well-designed in contacts, and mostly brick and stone material used buildings. On the other hand, in my second route I observed mostly steel, glass, reinforced concrete, steel construction or column beam system used buildings. In my opinion, this is the main difference, which also leads other differences to arouse between them, such as lifestyles or behaviors of people. Because as architects we know that design, choice of materials, etc. affect the lifestyle of people. In my second route I observed and mentioned about the hasty lifestyle of people. That was a perfect example of modern consumption culture and also lifestyle. On the other hand, I observed calmer lifestyle or behaviors of people in my first route, especially in Boston Common, which was a quite opposite version of downtown and financial districts. Another difference is about the places. As I mentioned before, in my first route I observed more lovely and warm eating or drinking places. On the other hand, in my second route I observed mostly elegant, famous fast food restaurants or famous coffee shops that are the products of modern consumption culture. To sum up, on the one hand, there is a city of Boston which is away from, or at least tries to stay away from, modern consumption culture with its warm and lovely places and historical sites. On the other hand, there is a city of Boston that fits the modern consumption culture with its elegance, modernity, and radiance.